Thank you very much. It was an excellent opening statement. Since we started the NDS as being the 2-3 approach, the two, of course, is China and Russia. And in the changes, and I've commented in my opening statement that when Senator Ernst and Senator Sullivan, Senator Rounds and I were over there and with you and then on through that area, it was very disturbing. During the trip, we came to the conclusion that our allies are worried about the pace of China, which is more evident, more visible than anything that we're doing. A key topic of discussion was China's build-up and militarization in the South China Sea. In fact, over 3,200 acres have now been, they call it reclamation. I don't call it reclamation because there's nothing to reclaim. It's creation of new land. There's no law, they don't have the legal authority to do the things they're doing, but they're doing them anyway. And that's gotten everyone's attention. And these reclaimed lands are up to over 3,000 acres now, and they have just a shocking amount of military equipment there, and it's very disturbing. It's increased its military activities in the sea to bolster its territorial claims there, despite U.S. and international efforts to maintain freedom of navigation. That's a serious problem. If you look at the location of these islands, it's right in the navigation problems, creating problems potentially for us. It's also increased the pace of the military activities. And the Trump administration's national defense strategy, as I mentioned, places an emphasis on improving our ability to expand the competitive space against China. Now, the thing that disturbed us, and I think I speak for all 5 of us who were over there just 2 weeks ago, is that our allies are actually having a hard time choosing between China and us because of the visibility of what they're doing. And I'm talking about allies that I mentioned in my opening statement. We talked to the Philippines, Taiwan, South Korea, Japan, and they all seem to be divided between the leadership. Their secretaries or ministers of defense and their foreign ministers are each taking a different side. So that was awakening to us to see that happen. So starting with China on the, I've just asked you the question. You've covered it pretty well. You talked about China's intent is clear. Well, let me ask you, do you consider China's buildup in that area as a direct threat to the United States and its allies?
Senator, I do believe that China's actions and what they've done in the South China Sea does threaten our position there. I think they're reaching a point of positional advantage in the South China Sea, and if it comes to a conflict, we'll have to deal with that.
Yeah.
I do believe that China gains when we don't call them out publicly, and it's important that we maintain that public criticism of China. Now, I've talked in the past that we should compliment China and thank them for the things that they are doing in the international space that's good for the order. Things like counter-piracy operations, their work to help the effort to remove chemical weapons from Syria, and on and on. These are positive things, and most recently their work in the UN sanctions regime against North Korea. We should thank them for that and appreciate that.
Yeah, and I understand that.
But at the same time, we should hold them accountable for the things they're doing that are provocative and aggressive to their neighbors and to us. We do have to counter the perception, as I mentioned in my comments, that the U.S. is either a declining power, which I don't believe, or a disinterested power, which I also don't believe. Mm-hmm. But that is the perception. And we must work to counter that.
Well, I know that's perception because we were there and we heard that articulated, and there's no doubt what their feelings are. Just before I run out of time, I want to mention North Korea, and of course Russia is the threat, but North Korea is something that is a changing scene. We had a hearing last week in this chamber of our intel. We had the DIA and the CIA here. And we talked about this in some depth, and I just disagreed with them. I've never disagreed with Dan Coates in my life until last week. But when he asked the question, do you really think that this recent communication from UN to our president was one that we cannot depend on having any results? And they both said No, we've gone through this drill before. To me, it's different this time. We had a very direct, harsh response from our president to Kim Jong-un when he made the statement about having the button and I'll press it and all that. And it was immediately after that response that North Korea communicated with South Korea and said, we want to join in now with the Winter Olympics. And then, of course, they came out with this statement. And I can't help but think, look, his dad, Un's dad, never had the bargaining chip that he has now. The fact that November the 28th, that they sent something over that can reach the United States, that's something that he can use. People argue, well, it didn't have a payload. It wouldn't perform that well with a payload. That doesn't give me any comfort at all. They say it doesn't have the re-entry capability, but the fact that they can do that puts him in a position, I think, to be a negotiator. And is there anything further concerning the threat from Un that you want to share before I turn this over?
Sir, I'll just say that I do believe that the strength of the pressure campaign plan was a big part of bringing North Korea to the table, to the offer of a summit. Without the strength of the pressure campaign plan and its effectiveness so far, I don't think we would be where we are.
I appreciate that very much. Senator Reed.